I don't get it. I don't get why you want back in the game so bad. Don't get too gangster if you think about getting back in CBI. You know that motherfucker Mad Dog? Diamond won't dead, but his uncle the head of RDs, so Diamond ain't doing shit about it. He can't hit back without fucking up they new.
DMac is a character who's gifted with a razor-sharp mind with numbers. His teachers at school thought he was dumb, but that was far from the case. He may have not been able to read or write as well as the rest of his class, but that's because there was numbers swirling in his head. He was always good at math, and when Tommy realized he was his nephew, he wanted him to follow a different path. He put him in a stash house to keep him off the streets, and he told him he knew someone just like him, smart, always with his head in his books, but now he's dead because the street game caught up with him. Tommy was talking about Ghost, so he wanted to protect and shield DMac from the life that only ends up in death or jail. I think Tommy's idea was to help DMac follow a different path to that of Tariq St. Patrick, but I think Season 1 gave us enough clues to tell us DMac will never be able to leave the streets, which is one of the major differences between him and Tariq. DMac grew up in the streets, and so that's where he feels he belongs. Now in the rest of this video, we're going to be running through DMac's dangerous mistake, how killing Mad Dog could lead to repercussions not just for him, but also for Tommy Egan and his business. We're also going to run through the family dynamic, and why I feel the only choice Tommy will have is to teach DMac the game in Power Book 4 Force Season 3. When we picked up with DMac's story in Season 2, he was very much in recovery. He took a shot to the stomach at the end of Season 1, which was a tough lesson in the street game. You can get caught at any given moment, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. His wound had also been infected, and had it not been for Tommy knowing Mireya, who happened to be a nurse, who knows what would have happened. This was also very much a real representation of Chicago and the real world issues that we're currently facing at this moment in time. Violence continues to plague the city of Chicago, and it is dangerous. Now that's one of the differences between Season 1 and 2. 50 Cent and Gary Lennon, who came in as the new showrunner of Force, they had a conversation before Season 2. They spoke about how they wanted to implement what was happening in Chicago in real time. 50 said, "Make it right now, all the violence in Chicago." Chicago is one of the most dangerous and violent cities in America, reflect that. This is something we have to give the writers huge credit for. They were able to implement real world issues while still being able to go back to the roots of power. Now DMac has had a real tough upbringing. He was brought up in this world in Chicago which is full of violence, death, and where many probably find themselves in jail at DMac's age. Leon said it best, he's been to more funerals than he has birthday parties, and that's saying something for a 13-year-old kid. For DMac, his mother kept him away from JP because when he came out, she wanted to protect him, and that's one of the topics I do want to focus on very briefly. Who is DMac's mother, and could we see her being introduced in Forces Season 3? She has been mentioned a few times in a few conversations between DMac and JP, but we haven't seen a picture nor do we even know a name. But similar themes do run across the Power universe, so just like we saw Jukebox's mother Kenya being introduced in Season 2 of Raising Kanan, I wouldn't be surprised if we see DMac's mother. Picture this, if we were introduced to DMac's mother, we can learn more about his past, why she made some of the decisions she made, how he ended up in the streets, and just more about his background. This would add so many layers to his character just like it did with Jukebox. It would give us answers to a few mysteries around his childhood and upbringing, and would really help with his evolution of his character. Now having said that, this was one of the crux of the issues between DMac and JP. Yes, his mother kept him away from him, but DMac was right when he said they were living in the same city, and if DMac found his father, then why couldn't JP? The fact is, JP just didn't try hard enough, and only when he began to understand his situation with DMac did he start to understand the situation with Kate a lot more. They were very similar, and DMac wanted his father to fight for him.
Real fathers don't abandon their kids twice.
Now let's not get it twisted, not everything is JP's fault, this does go two ways. At times, DMac definitely doesn't help himself. He stole the gun that Tommy gave to JP and then went and used the same gun to kill a cop, which was very reminiscent to Tariq St. Patrick's first kill back in Power. Both of Tommy's nephews ended up killing cops, albeit for two complete different reasons, and I do feel like DMac did have to pull the trigger. Officer Bennigan was out of control, and he killed a cop to save his uncle Tommy, whereas for Tariq, even though he wanted to avenge his sister's death, who knows, he could have found himself on the other side of Ray Ray's gun and he might have even joined his sister. So despite there being a lot of similarities, there are huge differences between him and Tariq. Now after killing the cop, there was a lot of mess to clean up. Diamond dealt with the body while Tommy dealt with DMac, and he warned him to stay indoors, but DMac being the naive kid that he is at this moment in time, he couldn't sit still. It was foreshadowed early on when he wanted to be back in the game, and where Tommy gave him a job that would only be from the couch, but as I mentioned before, he's from the street. Now defying Tommy's orders not only landed himself at great shores, but it also pushed Kate to the drugs she worked so hard to stay away from. In a ruthless and unforgiving world that they all live in Chicago, DMac was a shining light of their family. He was the glue that kept everybody together. Kate was off her drugs, JP had a second chance to make things right, and so did Tommy. So DMac really was the glue. When he was sent away, just look how slowly things started to unravel.
You're gonna stay there until I think it's cool that you come home.
Tommy did this out of tough love. Even though he couldn't bring himself to say those 3 words, he does love DMac, and he knew he was doing this for his benefit. But would DMac stay at Great Shores for the long term? I think we all knew the answer to that question. It was only a matter of time before he returned to Chicago. Now I think something that went under the radar was Tommy missing this call while he was busy with Mireya, and there were a few times where Tommy did drop his guard because he was in love. He failed to notice Vargas watching him and Vic because he was too fixated on Mireya not hitting him back. He opened his door and kissed Mireya outside his apartment, where really anybody could have been watching, and they were, and then we saw Jenard and Shanti use that picture to put their next plan into motion. And the same goes with this scene. He missed a call, and I do feel this call was from Great Shores, because we then saw them bring in JP to tell them DMac had escaped. JP found him at Marshall's and told him to stay put, but again, he was never gonna listen. The moment he heard about how Diamond wanted Mad Dog dead, he thought he'd take matters into his own hands, and then appealed to Diamond directly to let him back into the CBI. So we saw him dealing with Mad Dog in broad daylight, which really was reckless to say the least, and you can see he still hasn't learned his lesson from being shot. Marshall even questioned him twice in Season 2. Why does he want back in the game so much, especially after he was shot in Season 1? Now the thing is with DMac, the more you try and control him and tell him what to do, the more he's gonna resist and rebel. It's just what kids do, and I'm sure many of you guys know who have young kids or teenagers. Tell him not to do something and just watch how they do the complete opposite, which I think we're all probably guilty of at some point in our lives. Now this is where it gets really complex and dangerous for DMac. He killed Mad Dog, and even though he wasn't part of the CBI, this risked the entire coalition that Tommy and Diamond have worked so hard to build, especially with the RDs who is led by King Kilo. Mad Dog was King Kilo's nephew, and for those who watched my Season 3 breakdown, will know I mentioned how one of the themes for Season 3 will be blood being thicker than water. Sometimes it's family over everything, and King Kilo will definitely want retribution for his nephew, just like I'm sure Tommy would do if it was the other way around.
And I promise you, Kilo, when you on the outside, I'll deliver it to you myself.
Jenard offered DMac to King Kilo, and this is going to be a huge problem, not just for him, but also for his uncle Tommy. What does Tommy do in this situation? On one hand, Jenard and Diamond are offering DMac up to King Kilo. On the other hand, he's Tommy's nephew, and he will definitely protect him at all costs. But what that means is, Tommy now finds himself with his back against the wall, and possibly in conflict with Diamond, Jenard, and King Kilo. So I do think he needs all the allies he can get. So does that mean he'll finally take DMac under his wing and teach him the game? I think Tommy has no choice. DMac killed a cop, and then soon after he went and committed another stupid murder in broad daylight. And if he continues the way he is, he really is going to find himself in danger and end up getting himself killed. Adding a threat from King Kilo and the RDs, I think Tommy's got no choice. He has to keep him close and teach him the game. Now on a side note, if JP is also killed at some point in Season 3, then again, Tommy will definitely have no choice. So there's also the angle we do need to consider. Elsewhere with DMac's character going forward, what I would like to see is this brotherhood with Marshall. Ahmed Ferguson, who was on the crew, has a podcast. He said we were going to see more of this brotherhood between DMac and Marshall in the final 2 episodes, which we did. But I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants to see more. So if DMac is entangled in the street game a lot more in Season 3, then we can only assume his brother Marshall will be. So the Marshall and DMac brotherhood is something to keep an eye on. Now with all of that being said, that's a breakdown of DMac's story arc in Season 2, where it ended with him killing Mad Dog, and where the repercussions could be fatal. So will Tommy finally bring him under his wing? Could we see the end of JP? And could we also be introduced to DMac's mother? Drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.